Why would a blanket take me over 1 year to knit? If you're curious about what a mood blanket is or how I decided to make mine, then stay tuned as I do a half-year check-in on my year-long project. Welcome, my name is Sarah YM, and on this channel I dive into my DIY, made by me creative project. Today, we're going to talk about my mood blanket. So, you may be wondering, what is a mood blanket? Some of you may be familiar or have made your own mood blankets. Well, a mood blanket is a way to record and reflect your daily mood for a year or whatever period you choose in the form of a blanket. Each mood is represented by a yarn color or each mood category, and essentially you create and have a visualization of how you're feeling throughout the year in a blanket format. Alternatively, people make temperature blankets, and you decide, but you can choose to record, say, the year that someone was born or an important year, like your first year of marriage, for example. And in your location, you can find either the high, low, or medium, whatever you choose, temperature for that day, and you can make a blanket out of it. And it's just a nice keepsake. It's very sentimental. It's a whip to kind of focus on throughout the year. So let's talk about my mood blanket and what I've decided to do this year. This is my first mood blanket I've ever made, but I know myself, and I know I didn't want to knit just rows in like a stockinette stitch or something like that. It's just, I knew I'd be bored with it because of my personality. There was nothing wrong in making a blanket like that. People have made beautiful blankets with a simple stitch where they do 2 rows for every day, and it's stunning. But I know myself, and I know I wanted something a little different, or I want something that maybe challenged me just a little bit. So I decided to make a miter square blanket where each miter square represents 1 week. So within that miter square, you're gonna have 7 days represented. The reason I chose miter square is it creates a beautiful texture with the way it's knit up. They create basically diamonds. I know it's a miter square, but they kind of look like diamonds, especially if you're doing color work in it. And then you get a gorgeous ridge down the center. So you've got all this texture in it, which I thought would look really nice. And it's an interesting enough stitch or, way to create a square that would keep me challenged a little bit as I figured it out. So I'm not going to go through in this video on how to knit a miter square. There are some wonderful resources out there, which I even use. I will link some YouTube videos that I use down in the description below, and they were very, very helpful, very clean and clear instructions on how to knit a miter square. Now, from those videos, they give you basic instructions, and I, of course, changed mine up a bit because I'm doing color work within the square, and the amount of stitches and rows in my square is different, things like that, but that's what I worked out for myself. But to get a basic idea of how to knit a miter square, that's what I use. All right, let's go into the details of the specific squares and my blanket layout. What I've done is I've made, each square is comprised of 64 rows. Now you're going to say, Sarah, 64 doesn't divide into 7 days. I know it doesn't. Now, the way a miter square is made up, it would mean that the later days in the week have way less stitches in them. So what I did was in the last few days of the week, they actually have more rows to them. That's why it's not a multiple of 7 for my rows. And here's another thing. The way the actual blanket is laid out, because they're diamonds, and then you're going to have half diamonds along the edge, you do 5, 4, 5, 4 in terms of number of squares. Sarah, that doesn't divide into 52. Yes, this is where I had a big challenge. I couldn't quite figure out what I wanted. So what I went with is I managed to get it so it's 50 squares. And then for the half diamond border at the bottom and the top, they're going to alternate week 51, 52, 51, 52, 52, 51, 52, 51. I picture it in my head a certain way. Who knows how it's going to turn out? I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but we'll get there. And so it's going to also look a bit weird because the top, they're going to be the, well, actually, I'm not sure. I'm not there yet. I have an idea of like how many rows per day, etc. I want to do. Do I want to do all 7 days in half a diamond, or do I want to split it up? But we will get there later in the year when I struggle with that. For now, I'm just making my squares for the week. This is a lot, right? It's a year-long project. You're tracking your mood every single day, and you're knitting something over a very long period of time. So how am I tracking everything? Well, my day job is in finance, and we love our Excel spreadsheets and workbooks. So it was just very natural for me to create an Excel workbook where I have a key of my yarn, the layout of the blanket, and then I have different worksheets within the workbook for each month, separated further down into weeks where I have the days. I plug in the mood, copy and paste, so I even get the color grid. I have a key in like, okay, you're gonna knit X amount of rows for each of these days, and then somewhere where I actually put in where I'm tracking where I am. So I know if I'm in the middle, I know I'm on week 18, I'm on day 2, row 3. I know where I am. I'm not losing my mind. So another thing I'm doing is on my actual blanket, I am marking down the week as I finish it. So when I look at my blanket and I pick up and I go, okay, what am I working on next? I see it and it matches my template. And I can see where I am, what week I'm going to work on next. The way you construct a miter square blanket, at first you are going to work in order of the weeks, but eventually you start to get a little bit off by a couple weeks. So you definitely do want to track if this is the method you're going to use to construct your blanket and the layout you're going to use. Another thing that I've done is, or another reason why I've put this in an Excel workbook, is I can load it up where it's in my Google Drive and it's accessible different ways. So I'm not carrying a book with me, it's on my phone, it's at home on a laptop, things like that. So if I'm working on something anywhere else, I can access that and keep track. Or not even just access the pattern, it's a way for me to keep track of my mood. If I'm somewhere else, I can quickly just log in and be like, this is how I'm feeling today. I don't have to write it down somewhere. It's really quick and easy. It's in a Google Drive. That's why I've chosen that. Now I've talked about how I'm kind of doing everything. We're in June, or it's June. We're about halfway through. I'm not halfway through knitting my blanket. I'm close to halfway through knitting it, but I'm not quite there. Got to do some catch up. But how am I feeling about it? Let's do a little check-in. There's a few things. Overall, I'm very happy with it. I am not bored with it yet. It does not feel like a chore to knit up, my squares. It's very relaxing. I'll choose a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon where I've got nothing going on, and I'll batch knit, and I'll throw something on TV, or I do it at night to relax and unwind. So I'm very happy with that. I'm finding that it's working for me so far. I'm liking the miter squares. I like how they look. I like how they give a bit of a challenge, but they're not too hard. One thing is my palette. I like the yarn. It is an acrylic, but it's very soft to touch. It's going to be a very soft blanket. I wanted a large range of moods, which means I did have to go wide with my color choices. If I were, or when I probably do something similar again, maybe it'd be a temperature blanket or something in the future, I might try and toy with the idea of choosing bigger ranges and less colors, all within the same tone. So you could have, for example, like a cream and white colored blanket, very minimalist, almost not too jarring to the eyes. That might be an interesting thing to play with in the future, or for the next mood or temperature blanket project I decide to do. There is a challenge with that though, like you're trying to find a yarn you like with a very large range in tones. So that could be a different challenge for sure. Oh, and another thing is tracking my mood. In the beginning, I was every day going in and reflecting on the day, and it's a great way to sit down and reflect on your day. You're actually like, how was today for me? in reality, what I'm finding is I'll probably go something like 3 days and then I'll do a check-in like, oh, I need to update my mood blanket tracker, and I'll kind of do a check-in like, how was 3 days ago? And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to reflect on 3 days ago, 2 days ago. That's okay. But it is something that I didn't maybe intend on. My intent was like reflect every day, but that is becoming a little bit much for me. So I'm not doing that. But yes, overall, happy with it. And I'm excited to see how it's going to turn out. I'm liking it so far. I can really see it coming together. I've started to put in my border squares, which are my neutral color, my border color in between the squares. I do intend on doing an additional border just to clean up all the edges once the blanket is done. But we'll see once we get there in January how I feel about that, and even what kind I want. I have not decided on that yet. I don't need to decide on that yet. But it's kind of nice to take a check-in, see how things are going, and share with all of you one of my projects, which is going to take me over a year to make. Thank you for joining me. And if you are interested in keeping up to date with this mood blanket or the other projects I have in the works and coming up and planned, then stay tuned, join along, like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, bye.